다 로면 까말로 실제베 곰림 세네 다 곰림사 곰사디 가다라 안데 처식 저 이스라엘 저자가 이제 싸고다고 가서 그 상고자네 다 지도자네 단다디 아니 굶지기도 다 이말 굶지 콤버치야 굶지치야 체드니네 아니 저와드제니 콤버 가서 굶지치야대로 곰세.
The title of the text reads Bhavanakrama, which literally means the stages of meditation. And then the verb for meditation is used in an active verb. It's not a passive verb. And if this suggests that we are talking about a stages of meditation which is consciously and deliberately cultivated. So the Tibetan word for meditation is gom, which has a connotation of cultivating familiarity, deliberately cultivating familiarity.
딕 아니 좀제도 가르쳤나? 다 되게 고르시면 되는 건 아주 참말로 동네 메드바다 대환 대바레디 이내 랑 심지왕도 송. 심 용배 상왕도 송외 아니 동네 메드신도 동네 삼매 잡지 용대야. 동네 줄이야. 아니 가서 그 랑강강 죽대야지. 대환 대장 아니 대외 줄이야. 배지가 소리 세우시시제 천난 것 안에다 대외 줄이야서 꼭 하고 차야 되겠지. 그 저기 여기 있잖아요. 다디 가다 가게 넘버스로나 심용배 상황도 송 되게 제발이 심랑왕도 뒤야 말이. 자 디디 인도 다 나르기 굶지 지고를 참아샤지제. 땅나 굶지 닝버때 야파 야란시 퇴하기 굶지 싸러시 된제. 봐. 뇨모랑 랑강강기 콤배 숙저 봐. 텔레야 디 독초들라 아니 굶지 싸러시 때네 아니 굶지 닝버 텔레야 파 야란로트야 다 디가다레샤 곰 슬잖네 가다이니 랑섬 요도 섬 용부 상왕도 랑강강기 콤배왕기 송대야 텔라 다 콤바 싸바시 때 뇨모베 독초 뇨모베 녀베 초려야 콤바 싸바 때베 타네 아니 콤바 굶지 닝베 왕기 상왕도 랑강로데야 디 도고요.
And then the title of the text, Stages of Meditation, the term meditation in Tibetan Gom, has a tremendous significance if we think carefully. What it suggests is that, as we discussed earlier, although we all naturally aspire to be happy and overcome suffering, but we, from our own experience, we also know that often we experience pains and suffering, despite our desire to avoid them, in a sense that we engage in the causes and conditions that create our own unhappiness. And also, often we find ourselves that we have a much greater reluctance to engage in activities that could actually lead to our more long-lasting happiness. So there is a degree of ignorance and also reluctance on our part. And the problem, why this is so, is because, as the Tibetan masters say, that our normal way of being, or basic habitual tendency, is that we let ourselves controlled by powerful thoughts and emotions, and our thoughts and emotions are controlled by negative states of mind, and it is because of this vicious cycle, that ourselves being controlled by mind and mind being controlled by negative thoughts and emotions, that we always perpetuate the cycle of suffering, pain, and so on. So what the term meditation suggests is that we are deliberately taking a stand to reverse this habitual tendency, so that we are in some sense replacing this by cultivating new habits, implanting new propensities in us through deliberately cultivating certain familiarity with the practices. And this is what is suggested by the title, Meditation Gom.
다 되게 곰들이야. 다 해지다 그냥 망치기 kinjim인들이 곰슬럽도 다로 디브샤체. 다 디브를 치루텔라. 아니 텐텔라 로 양의 양도 디브를 체니 라다 디브를 치루텔라. 아니 텐테가로 로 해니 샤니. 아니 텐텔라 로 냐르체바. 냐르체바 디브를 치루지. 다양 전텔이야 전텔라 로티 내 고야이마 다 로티 전텔라 그게 내 고야이마디 야나 양도 잡아채 야나 양도 잡아채 로티 계산 가려요 봐 로티 뭐주나 정 가려요 봐 근데 잡아채가 또지 생비 띵네 대박이네 나 로티 두고도 나 로티 여고도 삼배 다 아니 대박이야지 다 뒤도네 듬베 아니 tanyan chang yu yare da so the reason is that dumba yong le ya ani kada tele ya machine dumba chi yong le ya de yuan jian tong gu yare so the yin du tanyan de ni mi sam ani de yang ne yang do da jia ba chen da tele ya jia gong shi do so da kada jia gong bu tuan ne tanyan de lo di bu chi ya ji tang sam da ni bu sui ya ji tang jia mi chi bu tanyan de ga lo han ni xia ne di bu chi ya.
So when we speak about meditation, we learn that the essence of the meaning of the idea of meditation is familiarity, cultivation of familiarity with the chosen object. As some of you might already know, when we look at types of meditation, we find two principal kinds. On the one hand is what could be called more single-pointed meditation on a particular object. And in this kind of practices, the manner in which we cultivate the familiarity with that object, chosen object, is through simply placing our mind single-pointedly on that chosen object without any distraction and in a completely unwavered state of mind, in some sense fusing one's mind with that object. So it is in this way one cultivates a kind of familiarity with that chosen object and making some kind of fusion. So this is one type of meditation. This could be called the single-pointed meditation or placement meditation. However, there is another kind of meditation where the familiarity is cultivated more through a rational or analytic process, whereby you are not simply focusing on a chosen object, but rather you are cultivating a kind of a familiarity, cultivating a sense of closeness or empathy with that chosen object through a more application of a critical faculty. For example, by reflecting upon the pros and the cons of having a familiarity with that object, by reflecting upon the positive qualities of your meditation, by reflecting upon the shortcomings of not having such a kind of a focused mind and so on. And so what you see here is a kind of a more rational and critical approach through which you develop a kind of a closeness to that chosen object. So what we need here is, first of all, a kind of an eagerness to cultivate that kind of quality of the mind. And that kind of eagerness, can only arise if you have some understanding of the benefits, the merits of meditation, and also the disadvantages of not having a kind of a focused mind. Once you have that kind of understanding of the pros and cons of meditation, then you will develop a sense of eagerness, and this eagerness will lead to a greater commitment to that practice, and this commitment to the practice will then make your mind close to that chosen object. So that's one type of meditation which could be called more analytic meditation. So principally there are two types of meditation.
야 다가는 신기 나란서 넘주 아니 즉 드리지레 삼는 나란서다 능수 잠려야 시샤네 능수 지들 나와 대잠려야 시샤네 드리지레 삼네 차바로 제셔봐 멍구식 취돼요래 대연은 내다되면 뭐지 지당내 밑에부터 용되게요래 여봐 인도산에 다 유진내주 대용마도 근데 이미 다 잡아잡아 싶시도. And also the importance of applying one's critical faculty can be understood by simply examining our interaction with the world. Generally, we know that from our own experience, often there is a big gap between our perception of reality and the reality of the situation itself, the way things really are. Often there is a gap between our perception and reality. Now, through application of the critical faculty, we'll be able to bridge that gap and make it closer and closer so that our perception matches the actual reality of the situation. 곰 림바 소나되기 아니 곰주자네 아니 지들 대바는 신성려야 냠냠 깨발라 코라 로 르름네 꽝과지 된 르름네 도 꽝과지 야 디마주나 양코 검제 된데 그 지대비를 임바래 간다 가서 꽝과할 처가 요르데 이내 코라야 그림고 따다 뭐주나 꽝 라와디 네바께 라와디 냐로 꽝디네 장제 아니 꽝 까와디디 고 갈레리아 네바께 라와 네바께 까와디디 아니 갈레 고 슈골레요나 고 간다 가서 그게 냠용기 심어르지 예버디 나망가메 냠용기 심어디 치마치마 라라로 돼야지 용도가 자 드린드자네 림버디 야 그림디 만어 거야 개침 버리 드린드 냐라 검제 된데 만어 가지고 요래 만어 여봐서도 마세베 그림 만어 가지고 요래 자 드린드 나도 냠린 제인드자네 아니 뭐 만어 상게 미쳐와 아니 장 상황 장 맞춰봐 장 용수 상황 용수 줘봐 뒤에야 그림 맞추고 근데 지 거야 내가 저도 봐 근데 인도 검림 소야 되는 있어요.
And the second part of the title of the text, stages of meditation, again has a great significance. What it suggests is that in order to effect that kind of systematic cultivation of meditation, systematic cultivation of familiarity with the chosen object of meditation, what is important is to have a kind of a gradual approach, an understanding of the sort of processes of mental development. Because if you don't have a proper understanding of the process of the development, then your progress in the meditation will not be very successful. Because what is required in one's spiritual practices is to have the ability to initially establish a base, so that as you cultivate meditation further and further, you will be able to build your realization upon what you already have attained earlier. And to do that, it is important to have some kind of understanding of the systematic path, some kind of understanding of the actual process of the development of mind. And because of this, Kamala Shila mentions in his title the stages of meditation, the important, emphasizing that importance. So we find, therefore, in the teachings of the Tibetan masters, often they say that in one's meditation, not only is it important to choose the right object of meditation, the right content of your meditation, but also one must choose a meditative path that is comprehensive, that is complete. And not only that, but also one must have a proper understanding of the actual processes of the development of mind, so that one can pursue the path in the right order. So we're going to take a break here. So what are the photographers doing?
The first session finished now. Quick. 다 주름을 배지 여러분들 다 가다 개체로디 고라 찬데 고문 관배를 봐 샤윈도산에 대차네야 되는 숨도 채래 노대원도 채네 근데 자주문을 좀 채서.
So the text, Stages of Meditation, begins with a opening sentence which reads, I will briefly explain the stages of meditation for those following the sutra system of the Mahayana. Now this reference to sutra system can be understood in terms of the division of Buddha's discourses into the category of sutra, the category of Vinaya, which is the monastic practices and ethics, and the category of Abhidharma, which is the knowledge. So one can understand this reference to sutra in terms of these three categories, and referring to the sutra, which is the collection of discourses that emphasizes the practices of meditation. In Buddhist teachings, we understand three principal aspects of the practices. One is the higher training in morality, Shila, and one is the higher training in meditation, Samadhi, and higher training in wisdom, Prajna. So of these three, the text here can be understood as emphasizing and making a special explanation of the practices that relate to the higher training and meditation. But the sutra can also be interpreted in a much broader way that would embrace all the various aspects of the teachings of the Buddha, which includes also the three higher trainings, the morality, meditation and wisdom. And when you interpret it in that way, then the paying homage to the Manjushri at the beginning by the translator, homage to Manjushri, will also be appropriate, because the key teaching of the text would be that of the generating the wisdom of emptiness.
태고 첨부선이 즉 가르용이잖아요. 단 너디 공리야. 다 가서 그게 태고 지중보다 중문구 여기 있잖아요. 택신 손도다 또 청주선 닝지 자월 기회 지산제의 손 용서어디 닝지 자월 지든지. 다 안데 닝지 자월 기회 지금 샴페인 누문인데 그 쎄도 되는 거 샹이지. 얘는 대단 데다 탑지쳐 신주에 있는 냠네. 당이 최이담이 그다 최이담이 송기가 있는잖아요. 다 태보침을 자, 이제 이사해. 그래서 태보침을 아니 너지.
The significance of mentioning the word Mahayana here is to underline the point that there are, among the sutras that are attributed to the Buddha, there are those that belong to the Mahayana tradition. And another significance of using the word Mahayana here is to really underline the subject matter of this particular text, which is the practice of compassion. Although in general it is said that all the teachings of the Buddha are rooted in great compassion, but especially in the Mahayana tradition, a great emphasis is placed on cultivating what is called bodhicitta, the altruistic intention to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings, derived through compassion. And that is the key element of the Mahayana path, and which includes also, as part of its complements, the practices of the six perfections, generosity and so on. And the text also, by using the word Mahayana, suggests that one of the key themes of the text also is to explain the various aspects of the path related to cultivation of the wisdom or realizing emptiness, wisdom understanding emptiness, the selflessness of phenomena or selflessness of dharma.
다전에 태고침도 노디 수익이 제수 주번 남기 관배인바 손자네 디 난가지 통기도 다 지산제의 처다 공간 나 공간다 안데 아니 노디 수익이 제수 주번잖아요. 산지 좀 된 데기 단 노드는 숨쉬베 지다 땀바 가서 그래 지다 땀바 그래서 용서서 좀 땀바 용서봐 상라 만나와 딘데기 다 간다지 좀 된 데기 노디 공부다 틈베 곰 자겐 지기 아니 곰림 노드는 시기 자지 인도산에 진주는 진짜 로비 가만히 실로 코랑 랑좀 말이지 와단 너디 고문의 시행인지 오늘 너디는 숨쓰나 아니 주신 주변의 시 짬도 경여를 말에 너시행인지 너드는 시행인지.
And then the expression meditation, stages of meditation for those following the sutra system is a reference to the source of the teachings which are being presented in the text. As we find in Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, where he says that, there is nothing new in what he is saying. He is extracting the essence of the teachings of the Buddha. Similarly here, Kamalashila is stating that what is presented here is not something that is own personal creation, but rather it is an extracted essence of the teachings of the Buddha in the scriptures. Now then the question could be raised, then, isn't it just a repetition? What need is there to write this text then he is saying that here I'm bringing it in a distilled form, in a concise way, so that the practitioners can apply them and understand them in a concise manner.
And 다른 감이 좋은 것이래. 제가 지지철 도나요 봐. 디나는 지 상계 처리야. 도나요도 디지기 야지 리카시 디주 지도와 지 소스 다바 요서지 가셔야 되는데. 야 가셔야 되면 스스로로야 머슈르 체체 마음에 내가 이식도 그냥 파 샤샤선데. 근데 니들 그거 스스로 알아. 레더리디 이내다 지금 산지의 추수 냠는情绪뭐이나 자방 내봐도 치고요 그래 자방 내봐도 치고요 그래 이내 냠는情绪전에 지금 산지의 답지 용서의 진로당 대的시በ체는 대지에서 수고해야 된다는 것이 보통이 소소나온로 지금 인시다 개매베체 인 쿨부 다 쿨충 쿨부리 담바 쿨부리 냠린차나 디인제부디 사주치고 용도야 가고래. 자, 담바 용서가 토하는 냠린 치투고 주나? 그 사주디 쳐요래. 담바요래. 자, 들이 미주잖아. 어다 슝직디 디 둥기 something.
Just as we had some discussion this morning that among people who take interest in spiritual practices in general and in Buddhist practices in particular, sometimes it can be the case there are some who sort of pick and choose and who adopt certain aspects of the Dharma teachings and then discard some other aspects simply because it doesn't appeal to them, simply because you don't like them. Of course, as followers of the Buddha, one must apply one's own critical faculty and cultivate one's own personal understanding. Analytic and rational approach is, of course, important, but also it is important to cultivate an overview, an understanding of the basic framework of the Buddha's teaching and situate one's own practice within that understanding of the entirety. You know, when done in this way, then there is a real possibility that one can not only make progress, but also one would have established a very firm foundation for future growth in one's spiritual realizations. Otherwise, there is the danger if your approach to the Dharma practice is patchy, you know, picking here and choosing from there, then similarly the results that you will gain from such approaches will also be patchy. It wouldn't have the comprehensiveness that you would otherwise have if you had a more comprehensive understanding of the entire and basic framework of the Buddha Dharma.
제가 알았어. 네. 이리서. 야야. 나한테는 늘 탐제 캠반이 신도 누도 토벌은 되봐. 똑바던 담배. 저 토벌 집에 유능도 깨능도 시속이. 나한테는 막 슝디에디 질 아니 뭐 수지 뭐이나 아니 그도 깨라 되봐. 교인이 왕래 아니 Geshe 다 가버쳐봐. 자, 근데 이번 이르자네 두벌셔에 탐제 캠프 고바서야 돼. 뭐 쉬셔야 돼요. 그 두도 깨는 때네 누구야 차대요. 다가는 신기 지금 뭐 쉬. 그다음에 교진지 아니 레부티아 승인디에 좀 마찬가지 봐. 아니 지 가서 좀 많아와. 근데 토안에 그 연구가 능시 아니 지점기 그게 주된 무슨 소가 대책이 레부디 상황이 준비해야 돼 봐. 뭐 실미 버리. 근데 이번 이들은 탐제 캠프 고반 대야 주된 몽구지다. 주된 몽구지 사와지다. 뒤에 차 탐제네 무슨 소가 있고 그래. 대담한 봐. 아니 주된 게는 떨어져 토안에 아니 연구해 봐 이나 아니 이 교진의 마트베다 중에 가서 줄때버지게 봐이나 양나 남이야 민중아 양나 다돈 중 진짜 태도 리처래 자 드리 베이드스는 다 탐색 캠페 고방성에 대 두던 겐 용서받아 만나시기 때문에 누구래 스타디 송샤.
And then the text goes on to state that the enlightened mind that we are, as spiritual practitioners, that we are aspiring is something that can come about only as a result of creating the causes and conditions. And the text invokes the general principle of reality, which is the principle of causation. Nothing comes into being without causes and conditions. Things come into being as a result of causes and conditions. Things cease to exist, when they meet with the circumstances and conditions for their cessation. Similarly, the state of the enlightened mind that we all aspire to, again, is a phenomenon that can only come about when the right causes and conditions are created. So that is one general observation. The second general observation that the text makes is, just as in everything in the natural world, not only do things require causes and conditions to come into being, but also those causes and conditions must be the right kind of causes and conditions. So the conditions must be complete, and also the conditions that are aggregated must be the appropriate ones to give rise to a desired consequence or desired effect. Similarly, in the case of achieving enlightened mind, not only must we seek causes and conditions, but also we must seek the right ones, the right causes and conditions, and also in their entirety. And so the second observation of general principle of causality is then invoked here. And then the text goes on to say that otherwise, if things can come into being without causes and conditions, then the problem is that either everything must exist eternally, because there is no causes and conditions why they should exist in a particular way, or nothing would exist at all. So causation is a universal principle, and everything must come into being as a result of causes and conditions. And not only that, but also the right causes and conditions.
That telling us ribu shisadi, chunji ribu, any debe ribu, chawachibe ribu, any tedu ribu say, ribu shikwane, da samtangwa, chavyari. Any Nancy, any children on Lolia, any Takata Luria Yodabata, Lu Toya Yodebe, any the Shishi Nalola, do the game of dirting is chick. Do the game of double never channing. Any that yoding is chick. Decora will be Shilui by Shini Tony on the Yore. Something like you want to do a Mari. Tagana she to Sanjay Chile want to Choro, Sanjay Gobert Jim Mari. So today in the Tane, that the name move church to the Kian of Deba. Rangi, Tumbi Jujin the Dralea, Tumbi Jujin the Dogoya. Teleji, Kora no Durungi, Nielingi to Sajida. Telepan Dojigi, and Gain Shengi, Rajida, Hijishin Saro, or Denegi Kora, Jinshindu Yodeva, Chulu Yodeva dear, Kora, Mubishilu in Bari. That day Nangzella, any she to get a Susu Roma, go to get Sashi Yodeva, Kora Denegi Tane, Mopa Jaya Yodachi, Chick. Diana Kuyinju, Geshe Jibe Dani Rede, Ine, Tedante, Yanchi, Shishila Dane Tade, and a Tudo. Shingle Shishila Dane, and it tuts at Tin Dava the Mamba Tadawasane, Shishila Dane Shayon in the Sane. Manage under Tunda Zadanin doing Tundelini, and Demidu, Chitan, Tudo, any Tayo Sinisha. Kansas, that was just about the shame, Zane, called Tayo Shame. We are it, said the interview. Taya, None Tani 라지 대화 동네 당용 된데 용게 그 최식도 가 된데 용 수진기 때문에 디도 용야 매바리 수진 권에 때문에 아니 대배 뭐 쳐야다 지금다 지금 마음배 당초 컴퓨터 소식이다 대배 뭐 쳐야 그랬어 보이나 제가 간다니 뇨 컴퓨터 뇨 아이 이 말봐 해지기 말해 디동 소냐 해지기 말해 당시 간다니 지 대다 대신 두시게 아니 대화도 동네기 소용게 다가는 시기 대배 아니 냠뇽 차야여 돼 봐. 마음변 중주 지지여 돼 봐. 아니 된대기 다等이제 가다 리비等이 셰베 셰섬 리섬게 다等이기 뭐 진리 해 봐래. 봐. 저들이 빌리서네도 수신되면 두지 숨세네. 아주 셰데 된대기 다 대선 직다 체용이야래.当时这里什么了？可能没有西路，就这边这些嘛都现在给买不来。所以다가는 신 안서 나서 자유인데 안서 랑근 안게 동해 민등에 지다 대wan 대견 지에 되버디에 뭐 실루인 거래. 와 대화도 동네에 라는 두대 끼는 라레버디에 뭐 춘이 뭐 실루인 거래. 당연히 독서다.
So we talked about the principle of causation that is universal and that is part of the natural world. Here, perhaps it would be helpful to reflect on what the Buddhist philosophical text describe as the four principles of nature or four natures. These four principles. One is referred to as the principle of nature, the law of nature itself. And then the second is the principle of dependence. And the third is the principle of functionality, functions. And the fourth is principle of validity, like logic. So when we talk about the principle of nature, we are really talking about what could be described as laws of nature, the way things really are, and simply by virtue of their existence. For example, when we look at the idea of causation, cause and effects, further, we will find that within what we classify as conditions or causes, we find two principal categories. On the one hand, there are the actual causes that, as a result of certain interaction with certain conditions, actually turns into that effect, like a seed turning into a sprout. So that kind of cause is called substantial cause or the material cause. And then you also have many other conditions that enable that material cause to mature into that fruition. And these other conditions are called cooperative causes or cooperative conditions. So even the notion of cause itself is more complex once you start look into it. Now, why there is a material cause and why there is a cooperative causes for things to come into being, that's the way it is. And that is what the Buddhists call the laws of nature, the principle of nature. And this kind of principle of nature, the fact that there are causes for things, the fact that the causes need conditions to give rise to the effects, is not something produced by karma, nor can they be said to be created by some all-powerful, all-knowing Buddha. They are simply facts of nature. Similarly, within the category of phenomena, if we examine carefully, we'll find that there is the physical world, the world of tangible experiences, the world of sensory experiences, the things that we can touch, feel, smell, and so on and so forth. This is the physical realm. And then there is also another dimension of existence, reality, for example, like things which do not have such solidity and concrete existence, but at the same time they exist as some objects of knowledge and have a certain function in our understanding of the world. These are abstract ideas. For example, like the concept of time. The concept of time is contingent upon a physical reality or a reality that exists out there. But time itself cannot be pinpointed as existing in an objective way. Yet at the same time, one can say that time exists. Similarly, the constructs such as person and so on, these are another dimension of existence. And then there is also a third dimension of existence which we call the realm of consciousness or the realm of experience. And this refers to the agent that we all possess within us that allows us to have some kind of cognitive capacity, the ability to perceive things, the simple fact of our experience of pain and pleasure. Now, from the Buddhist point of view, these are known as the realm of consciousness or the mental realm. And from the Buddhist point of view, it is believed that physical matter alone cannot provide the basis for cognitive activity. In order for an individual or a living being to have some kind of cognitive capacity or cognitive activity, you must have this realm of the mental or the experiential realm. Now, why there is these three different dimensions to reality? That's the way it is. That's the natural laws of nature. And similarly, we all naturally possess the instinct to seek happiness and avoid suffering. And also we all possess a kind of a right to pursue that aspiration, to fulfill that aspiration. Now, why do we wish to avoid suffering? Why do we wish to be happy? That's the way it is. That's again a fact of nature. There is simply no explanation beyond that. And this is what is meant by the laws of nature. This is what is meant by the principle of nature.
다 칠로그는 숙쟁기 책 나라리야 야 지게 가서래 그는 제 소소리야 누가 소소소야 돼봐 누가 편준 간다임바 전다 지기 누베 아니 자신다들이야 그 유언도돼야 다들 배지 자치베고 써야 돼 성기 다가는 신 낭 셰발로 집에 있니 배로 차잖아 그나 지 낭자로 집에 있나 직나로 좀 있나 그 뭐지 용되네 다가는 집은 토벌로 좀 있니 야 뭐지 용되네 다 지간다지 셰바 소소스 다지 토벌 담면데 소소스 칠레로 맨날 용되기도 봐 패지디 자치베고 있을 때 자초부터 성기 다 시베 나로리아 베나 소소소 네툭 삼베 뽑았대다 shum번이부디 네 미누 삼베 shum번이부디 군이 간다래도 겨도 군이 칠렘 소소 제고도 맨자도 지사고 자치베 시디 때문에 수정 나로래 자체베 시대네 간다이 번능신 간다 중구여 봐. 되는 신체는 나 시베 나네 시바소스 칠레면데 되네 간다여 봐.
When we talk about functional laws, the laws of function, it refers to the specific functions certain things and experiences play. For example, like in the realm of the physical world, we find that certain matters have certain properties. And one particular substance may have one property, another substance may have another property. And through sort of combination and interaction, and then it can either, and these properties, these substances may actually sometimes be in conflict with each other, sometimes may sort of have a more compatibility. And through the interaction with these sometimes conflicting matters, again you create certain other properties, like emergent properties. Now, all of these are functions of these things, and this is what is meant by functional laws or the principle of function. And just as in the material realm, physical realm, we also find similar laws operating in the mental realm. For example, like when you have a certain kind of anxiety, that give rise to a feeling of insecurity and feeling of unhappiness. Similarly, when you have experienced some kind of distrust of someone or a loss of faith in someone, then it immediately creates a certain sensation and experience within you. That's the function of that particular state of mind, psychological state. Similarly, we also find that within the mental realm, certain states of mind oppose certain states of mind. For example, like when you cultivate a sense of confidence, that sense of confidence acts as an antidote against depression or a sense of loss of faith and so on. So within the mental realm, you see that there are certain states of mind, psychological states, which are complementary to each other, whereas others which are directly opposed to each other. All of these are different functions of the different cognitive states.
So that Tindegida Tenji Nuvasos Yodenge Dani Kore Penzu Hoda, Kaza Penzu Chigilia, any Panda Neven Chilero Yodeva. Tindegi Rengi Chingmu Sujin Shoyne Dado, Nan Sheve Shoyne Dado, Nigalo, to the Gen to the edge. That the day in Luzane, that's under the Sanji Choyan shares in the Sendo Soja in Bari. Sendo Soja in Luzane, Sendo Soja Dadandi, Nesem Yambati, Mion Show, Nesem Yambati, Tabo Show, Sen Melam Jab. Negula, Besson Sambuch, Jeb Show, Sen Melam Jemni, Sen Sambuki Mare, never shows some never Shagi Mare. Down culture or Slona. That because sem kanda kang nazul pingiba sem kanda kangi nugiba that they try to put that some that remember lemburwa send that kanda never shin karimba pember shin karimba didi yan shimache dine never shin sem ba dujudan singedi sem gyawazen number to pension gyawa kadakadi yodabati Shemba Cheni, da never Shingi, Semji, Shuchung Donyalia, Di Gande, number to was named Kadaji, Shebadi, Shuksharta. Di Nigalo, Dula Temba Yuduzane, Ganda Jube, because of Ganda Yusore, Kada, Minduba, Dunge Jinjigi, Lotigi, Judy Zecheni, Dungoktochia, Jushuchung Donya. Di Gande Lotigi, Judy Zecheni, Judy Shukshartoya. Then those Cheni, Kada, Kazurgi, Chini, Chawachiriba, any Julep Deberiba. That she's a D-tone, any, that, you didn't Alia, that didn't Chigudu, you didn't Alia, didn't Chigudu, Sambe, any Kashurigi.
So all of these functions, the various specific functions of the individual things or sort of psychological states, and these are again, grounded in the principle of causation, causes and effects. So, because certain states of mind, say, in the realm of the mental, certain states of mind come into being as a result of certain conditions, and because of that nature, it has a particular function which acts in a particular way. So the function itself is grounded in the principle of causation. So once you have some understanding of that, then you will be in a position to utilize the function of that mind and try to either enhance it or eliminate it or decrease the force. Because when we talk about spiritual practice, particularly in the Buddhist context, we are talking about a process of transforming one's mind, a process of inner discipline, process of mental discipline. And here, the key really is the transformation of mind from an undisciplined state to a disciplined state of mind. And the way in which we do it is not simply by making a prayer or a wish that may all the negative aspects of my mind disappear. may all the positive aspects of the mind grow in me. It's not simply by doing some prayers like that that the result is going to come about. Rather, one has to make a conscious effort based on an understanding of the mechanics of how mind functions and various emotional and psychological states function, that one makes the effort. For example, like if one wishes to decrease the force of a negative aspect of mind, one has to search for the causes that give rise to that negative states of mind. One has to try to undercut it by getting at the root. And also at the same time, one needs to enhance the force of its counterforce, its antidote. So by getting at the root of the negative states of mind, a particular negative state of mind, and also at the same time increasing the force of its antidote, we will then be in a position to gradually bring about the transformation that we are seeking. So this is how the real transformation takes place. And once you have understanding of the functions of the individual states of mind and also the understanding of their causes and conditions, the causation, then you will be able to utilize the principle of valid proof that if you do this, then this will happen. This comes into being as a result of that condition. And the understanding of the causes and conditions and understanding of the functions can then be used as a basis to derive further inferences. And this is what is meant by application of the valid principle of validity or principle of valid proof.
다 패지 러나로야 탑기 초스다 시르고 초사 중도와 패지란도 탑기 초 패지를 마도볼로 그는 닝지도 민중소도 좀 마도볼로 찍으러 so that is the understand 패지 디인스리 심그게 심코랑기 그게 도다로 공 견대인데 그지 아니 찍찍 그게 다 겨와서 짜니 디토네 아니 디토네 아니 가다로리아 서주태하기 도다 찍찍 서주 동양 도다 찍찍 다드네 시르부 쳐디디 패지 망체지 르 아니 뭐여기 내수디 마시면 체체 그다음 뭐여기 내수래 지로도 지되겠지 그러나 미닥발라 딱벌 진대봐 두뇌는 신라 아니 대월다대야 다가는 신기 다 매발라 다도 다대야 딘데기 뭐여기 내수디 마시면 체체 델레 지로도 진대기 르직지기 야 가서 녀도 써야지 genji 차이도 가. 그래서 디 매바 써야 될래야 연주란다 디 독초야 로디 기기어데 이네 디 독초로 두야디 아니 유기내로 셰버쇼나 유기내로디 달라본데 디 짜자니 디 셰네 아니 셰베 로티 콤바야 빼요나 아니 디 독초기 그러나 미다보다 딱보는 진배 로티 숙자야리야 아니 미다베는 시 임버디 달라 미라버는시 임버티 셰네 미라버 통댕에기 로텔이야 콤니 디니버 수수시는 등진 로티 수수수로 돼야지. 그래서 시르부 칠레 또 미다지스레. 근데 유기내로다 짜지니 셰과디니 된절레.
So we find that within the realm of the mental, when we try to effect some kind of positive transformation, there seem to be two principal kind of paths. One is the approach that is normally found in all the practices that are described in the Buddhist text as belonging to the method aspect or method dimension, the skillful means. These include such practices as enhancing and cultivating and enhancing one's compassion, the cultivation and development of the altruistic intention to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings, and so on. These are one type of practices where their enhancement, their development really comes more through identifying their opposing factors and trying to reduce the force, to diminish the force of their opposing factors, and then cultivating the right kind of attitude. So in this way, we bring about the transformation. There is, however, another path which is relevant more to what the Buddhist text described as the wisdom aspects of the path. And this relates more to the rational aspects of the practices, such as cultivation of the understanding of impermanent, transient nature of life, some kind of recognition of the suffering nature of existence, and also the understanding of the absence of selfhood, self-existence, and so on. Because if you look at the problems that are arising from our lack of understanding, often, for example, like problems arise because we tend to grasp things as permanent when in reality they are not. Things are transient, and our inability to grasp that reality and our inability to recognize that transient nature leads to more complications. So only by cultivating the insight into the impermanent nature of reality, one will be able to overcome this grasping at permanence and enduring objects. Similarly, when we lack the understanding of the suffering nature of existence, then our attachment towards existence increases and so on. And only by cultivating the insight into suffering, we will be able to overcome that. Similarly, a lot of the problems arise because we tend to project a sense of selfhood when in reality there is no selfhood. So in this category of practice known as the aspect of wisdom, there is a greater need to cultivate right understanding of the nature of reality, where your understanding or your perception of reality must correspond to the way things really are.
그게 동대 아니 뉴몽 나리니 가서 그러나 그는 대자 셰당 사드테 더밍 뉴몽 다한테 직다 타르다 대주체디 실업 뉴몽 젠스도 와 다왕마스 실업 뉴몽 젠스 스르자네 고가다 방제 뉴몽이 뭐다다레디 대주체디 그 유를 내가 타야다 개하고 치실로 레디 이네 그게 잡아서 채네 그 또스 채니 그게 이 치실로도 진행이지 배신 있어요 그래서 대동대년별 초디에 유기내로 제 대단에 유기 된데 아니 유기 된데 소리다 가다 유기내주 가서 그 병업에서 가리인 버디 지머지신 시에 로직이 이 디녀부로 가지 있어요.
The fact that there are two principal approaches to the transformation of our mind can be understood if we look at the nature of afflictions of our mind. On the one hand, there are more impulsive afflictions or more emotional afflictions, one could say, such as attachment or greed or anger and hostility and so on. These are more impulsive, these are more emotional, they have a more greater emotional content. And on the other hand, we find other afflictions of mind which have a much higher degree of cognition, such as false views, viewing false belief in some kind of self-existence of the individual that has a much higher cognitive component. Similarly, sort of holding on to some extreme views is also a cognitive activity. So we see that even within the afflictions of our mind, there are those which has a less degree of cognitive activity and others which has a higher degree of cognition.
다 너도나 가다 칭업을이야 겐더자니 이니 민두베 최디 바 매버서가 능신 가다 난기 셰베 나로레 공 겐더자니 겨자레 타네 이니 디 동다디 야 기죽다 디토나 transformation 영향 되리샤.
So to summarize, the main point is that just as we observe in the physical world, there are certain substances that are harmful and we need to abandon them and try to get rid of their causes as well. There are others which are much more constructive and positive. We should try to develop and enhance them. Similarly, in the mental world, there are those which are destructive and there are those which are constructive. And we need to try to identify their conflicts and opposition and enhance the force of the constructive side and diminish, reduce the force of the negative side. And it is through this way a real transformation, spiritual transformation can then take place.
사다디 제인도 전에 이거 시관의 제야들서.
But the understanding of this principle is then grounded in what I described as the four principles of nature.
다데네 안데 다시 다데 규도 겐 대다가 나네장 마노징 마상에 봐도 땜버 샤오 좀전 갈 땐 그비 좀전 가서나 준 노발라 nenden chana ni yurbu shigi kyang deben jobu toba medo da pedso dene du tada mashe bale jang debu juwa mete sabon lo soba kaya ro shemena nyugu lo soba debu minjume chero sen dene inda du yong soba du 되게 kondu shibana jida du manowa da ngo manowa ani yong soba da chang changwa ani kurim mo chugo 디고레 소샤 나와나 제부 탐제 첨번 니지 다 토벌 제변 제부 탐제 첨번 니지 주다 겐트다 강샤나스 매바 다도 뮤롱단 자외 대다 땜버 민뉴 메기 왜냐 좀 된데 용거버 좀 상견에 두전남로 지게 셔버 대신 다게 좀 된데 간 니지 셔토 다 수양 디기 탐제 캠페인 저부 토비하게 규던 겐디 아니 초신의 디 킹중스샤 킹중스 다들이 랑가르 두고 말에 순주자네 다 탐제 캠페인 주지기 줄이야 다시 샤잔나 숨도 되는지 처리하래 그봐 냠님 મં구지 통은족이 내주 타네 가서 내가 차야 돼 버리 냠네 મં구지 중세 고주도 되니 이거야래 맨날 담이다고 싫었다고 사잖아 거라 공규도 담이디 아니 중세 고주 차인 버리 샹다변을 가도 와 근데 샹다 지다 아주 변에 지금 뒤준 속시 샤가 선배 진짜 મં구지 배지니 통은주든 저기도 배지 셔도 그랬어 그는 추중이냐면 뭔고지 통항을 주든 되는 배지 유구야래. 다 다가는 신기 안다 다음에 고민하고 지금 메다보 고민하는 서 차에 메다보 고민하는 데 주태디 다 라브에 메다보 고민하디 배지 통항을 주는 거다. 저 책임을 줘. 다 차에 메다보 끼지끼지 지귀等一些 고민하도 자셔나 배지 중세 고주 되는 되게 차대기야래. 다 되네 가서 우리 배나 배나 총리가 남샤로 배나 어디 신도도 배로 차잖아 아주 시발이야 차라 먹고 이어다 봐 아니 배 시발배 참는 남샤도 돼야지 패진 안做 신도 고주래 안 되는 것들 신도 고주래 강사령이 그로 냠뇨 야레베 그도래 아니 가서 우리 그게 신도 고주를 뭐로 권해야 강사 고란 게다 가서 우리 냠용기 피림기 아니 가서서는야 다 림지단에 또지 잡아쳐야 야 배지 용도 가버리 내가 텔라 때나 그 중세 고주로 사용 거야 봐 다디네 배너지 시도 차에 선배 모두 주야게 냠용 탑에서 고란 무주 차도 강사 고란 자 드려서 지는 가서 냠ling 내 멍구치 배지 안다 샤샤네 순간로도 저기도 비슷 하는 용도야지 배지도 봐 자, 드리 이거 인도산에 다 탐제 캠버 토비하기 규기 상라 만노 용수 쪽바디 아니 다시 신도 고유든 제래 리디디 다 지시를 롱로 때네 셰고야지 쳐도 와. 자, 드리 그 ton에 고구마로 상태기. 자, 드리 이거 인도니 탐제 캠버 어디다 탐제 캠버 롱로 때네 아니 셰기스 오늘 탐제 캠버서에다 건드리지 않으려나? 좀 된 대기 뭐부터 줘 봐. 상견네. 지도자네. 좀 된데 코라야 뭐 로발람지 내고 주야 돼. 로발람지 내고 되네. 아니 나나서는 신체는 강사 탐해 봐지. 아니 강사 탐해 봐. 치워근데. 아니 몸배 상황도 해야 돼 봐. 지 림베기 아니 되게 아도 공도 시험 타고 하는 신기 가다지 코랑이 냠린 그 타네. 아니 가다고 봐서 상견 경기를 사다로 상 연예에서 추배 아니 정수 문도 전네 아니 두진남이야 코랑게 냠뇽고 토네 이니 지게 댄샤바 도지스나 세샤바 디디 제소나네 라비 사치.
Then the text, after stating the need for developing the causes and the conditions, understanding the need for developing causes and conditions for the attainment of the enlightened mind, suggests that it reads that, moreover, you must develop causes and conditions that are not incorrect or incomplete. If you create the wrong cause, even after a very long time, you will not obtain the desired effect. It would be like trying to milk a cow's horn. And it goes on to then state that just as a sprout, you need causes for the attainment of the enlightened mind. And so emphasizes the need for kind of correlation between the causes and the desired effects. And then the author goes on to state that he will explain what these causes and conditions are, but then writes a qualification saying that he is not able to teach on his own. The text reads that just as a blind man is unable to lead others, I am unable to teach on my own. This is a kind of an expression of humility on the part of the author. On the literal level, this is an expression of humility, but there could be a deeper meaning to this sentence. Perhaps the author is suggesting that when we are talking about the causes and conditions of omniscience, we are talking about a very complex processes here, which involves various levels of practices on the part of the individual. The practices which may, sort of understanding of which may be at the level of direct perceptions, but there are others which may require more deeper analysis and inference, such as the understanding of the subtle impermanent nature of everything, the momentary nature of everything, and also the absence of self-existence of all things and events. These are subtler aspects of reality which are not so obvious to us, the knowledge of which requires application of critical thinking and inference. However, there is a further dimension of reality which may, at the level of ordinary being, remain completely concealed, and these are described in the text as thoroughly concealed phenomena. For example, within our own experience, there might be, within our own thoughts and emotions, there might be very subtle levels which we are completely ignorant, which we are completely unaware of. And in some sense, one could say that so long as our state of mind remain within a sort of certain ordinary level, there is simply no way that we have an access to this kind of understanding. But as the individual begins to enhance his or her capacity to sort of probe deeper into the nature of one's own subtle consciousness, it is possible that as the individual increases in his or her own sort of mental development, then the person may have some basis to infer that there are these subtle levels of experience. And then that, again, at that stage will remain inferential, some kind of conceptual understanding. But as the individual progresses further and further, then it is possible at some point the person may actually experience this subtlemost level of consciousness. And at that point, the knowledge of the subtlemost consciousness remains a direct experience. So maybe the author is suggesting here that there are levels of reality that is being explained in the process of the causes and conditions for attaining Buddhahood that are so subtle that he will only have to rely on the Buddha's authority to accept their validity. And then he goes on to say that I will explain the causes of omniscience as the Bhagavan Buddha taught them to his disciples after he attained perfect enlightenment or perfect awakening. This word, after he attained, is a significant one. This suggests to us that the Buddha, who was fully enlightened, was not fully enlightened right from the beginning. He was like us, ordinary person, ordinary being, with all the faults and the negative emotions and the the destructive potentials and so on, but as a result of his prolonged meditation and spiritual practice, he attained full enlightenment. So this is the sort of the significance of using the word after he attained full awakening.
Yeah.